What's going on, YouTube? This is your melanated warrior, Haywood Haynes, and this is another installment of Facts Over Feelings. Leave your feelings at the door so we can get to the facts, and we are right back at it with some explosive content. I'm telling you, there's going to be some very powerful information presented in this segment, and obviously it's going to be a follow-up from the last segment that ended abruptly, so apologize about that, melanated warriors, but we back at it. We're going to make sure this is the cleanup cruise drive. We're going to make sure that everybody get this work. You're going to make sure that these facts get out here, because that is of primary importance here at the FOF squad. Clarity, right? And the other cornerstone is making sure that we build our spiritual family. So on that note, I want to tell you guys, look, I am committed to the link there segments. We're going to get off into doing the lives. We're going to get off into the Q&A of the manuscript. We're going to get off into strengthening our connection, because we all we got. You know, because as we can see, none of us, a lot of us, I wouldn't say none of us, but a lot of us are not fortunate enough for our blood family to also be our spiritual family. So we out here, we're trying to make that connection. So I'm committed to that. You guys, your time, your resources, your energy, your support has all been duly noted. It's what makes this platform viable, and I appreciate that. You guys have been phenomenal. So let's get into it, because in the last segment we were saying what? The point to take away was not always should you take a side to an argument or get in the habit of that. At some point in time, you may have to question the science or question the argument. And what's even more profound is the fact that we give these individuals more credit than what they deserve, because they're not in a position to be, to get this sort of credit, because, either one, they are they stand on fraudulent ground, or they have a conflict of interest, or it's a combination of both. They don't tolerate that mess. They are not as liberal in their approach in terms of allowing something to compromise the worldview of their children. They cut it off at the knees, not inserted in the curriculum. You can't even come around them. Vigilant in their approach, disciplined in their approach. We, on the other hand, the complete opposite. You see, so what happens is, what we're going to do is we're going to suspend disbelief. We're going to say, okay, well, yeah, the science is infallible. The science is correct. There's nothing wrong with the science. We're going to take that approach, and we're going to see whether or not there is a monster that has been created when we allow it free reign, when we allow it to just run free with no objections. See, because what most people will say, they're like, oh, well, yeah, it's a socialization process. It's K through 12 programming. All that they do is just give you information that you can't use, and then they condition you so that you know what roles you have to fill in society and blah, blah, blah. And then we always say, oh, well, yeah, I've been removed from school. I've been out of school, and I have to relearn. Relearn what? Because but what you have to understand is life. Dig with me, walk with me on this, because I'm going to make it make sense. It's going to come full circle. What you have to learn is that life is a school. Okay, they gave you an institution, or institutions, if you go to the collegiate level, that you had to go through, and then you were always using your brain. And then when you got out, you was like, well, I could take this, take a little bit of that, take what I need. I specialize in the field. That'd be it. Other than that, if you're not in a field where you're always working your mind, you're stuck at a job where you do the same thing over and over again. So it gives you to buy into this illusion that the learning process is over with, when life is nothing but learning. You see, and we even say that, oh, I'm removed from school. Like, you stop learning or something. So this is the point that I'm trying to make. The point is that they know, the system knows, the learning never stops. So then you have to surmise, or you have to come up with, okay, who's teaching me now that I'm out, or now that I am through with the educational process? We know it to be entertainment. See, when we talked about science and religion, we know that they were extensions of each other. We know that science picks up where religion left off. We've already figured out that science is a lot more powerful than religion. But what happens when science hybridizes itself with entertainment? You create what's called an unstoppable force, which forces you to be an immovable object. Because then you have to then be able to stand strong on your convictions when you say that you question the science. Because everybody else is going along with it, and everybody else is ignorant of the fact that much of what they know, or much of how they view the world, is through the lens of science, and that science is more rooted in Hollywood than it is in the natural matrix. And by the end of this segment, you'll be able to distinguish between the two, because I guarantee you, if you are honest, and it's on you to be intellectually honest, that you will find out that you may have believed in the world from the science view given to you by Hollywood than you have from the natural matrix. And I'm going to expose that. Let's get right into it, because this is important. Like I said, we're operating off of the paradigm that, look, all this science is correct. Okay? And watch how hard it still is to believe in this shit. Even as we're operating under the guise that it's all correct. And you're going to figure out how much of what you believe is rooted in Hollywood science or how much of it is rooted in the natural matrix. Hell, how much of it is rooted even in the compartmentalized thought that you learn from the K through 12 programming. How does it match up then? I bet you it is. See, this is where I'm going to show you that Hollywood has more of your mind than you thought. Now, the thing is, let's get into a couple of articles right quick. The first one is from Scientific American. It was published on March 12, 2013 by Calliope Monoyios. So forgive me if I butcher that, but that's about as best as I can come up with that. Now it's entitled, You've Never Really Seen a Virus Until You See This. So that's this resource right here. Now let's read. Let's get into it. Artist Luke Jerram is a UK-based sculptor whose glass sculptures of microscopic life make the invisible visible. I was instantly transfixed by his sculpture's delicacy and intense beauty. Captured in these sculptures that is lost in the false color scanning electron microscope images we typically see of viruses and other extremely small subjects. So pause. See what, and we're going to read the rest of this article to garner more clarity, but what you already know right now is what he's stating, that look, I loved his microscopic sculptures because it's a far cry from the false color representations, and you're finna find out why, and then we're gonna make it all make sense. But let's read this article so that we can get to exactly what we need to know. KM, or the author, the one responsible for the article, says, what inspired your glass microbiology collection? Are you generally interested in science communication? Then he responds, because I'm colorblind. I'm interested in how we see the world and in exploring the edges of perception. Early on in my research, I discovered that viruses have no color, as they are smaller than the wavelength of light. Viruses are so small they can only be seen under an electron microscope as quite undefined, grainy images. So this is deep. So now again, what we're going to do, we're going to go back and forth. We're going to see how much of your outlook is based off of science from Hollywood, or science rooted in the natural matrix. Now, as you've seen, he said viruses have no color. Okay, they're smaller than the wavelengths of light. And then they're taken by these powerful electron microscopes, which can't even still make them out. We still have trouble making them out. They're, as it quoted, as quite undefined, grainy images. Okay, so this is different than the pictures that you receive or the artist renditions or the artist or artistic impressions, okay, of this work. So you used to see these spikes and these color reds and blues and stuff. That's not what goes on in reality. That's not what goes on in reality. So you have to ask yourself, okay, they can only see them through these powerful microscopes. And then when they see them, they are grainy images. So how am I supposed to trust what comes out of their lab? Now, at some point in time, I think my people have to convince me, you have to show me, you have to give me proof that at some point in time, Western science stopped lying. When can you convince me of that? Okay, since you never can convince me of that, let's move on. Because the reality of it is now you know what? These viruses that you know about, that you see on TV, when they give them blue colors and spikes and all of this different stuff, this is based off of what the images that they receive in theoretical math. The combination of the two is the end result. What you get is these 3D images that they show on TV. Like I said, this is Hollywood, because you also see this in the movies and you also see this in your textbooks at school. So you start to understand that the most powerful medium that they know to be of indoctrination is Hollywood. They know it's not school. So give that up. Stop talking about your indoctrination process through K through 12 programming. Understand that they know which one is the most powerful, and it's entertainment. And you're starting to see that what you think about this, what you think about the science you spend your time learning in school, is really more Hollywood than it is rooted in the natural matrix. So now we see that. We see what's going on with that, and we're going to move on to a couple articles, just like I said, to clarify our position even more. This article was from Forbes magazine. It was printed on April 18th, 2020. It's, the contributor is Victoria Forster. She's in healthcare. She's a cancer research scientist and childhood cancer survivor. So this is affected on a couple of different levels. Like I said, we're taking what is said by those who are in the field, okay, in that matrix. So don't just sit up here and think that these are YouTube doctors or somebody got their opinion and they're throwing it all around and whatever. No, this is coming from them. So let's continue to read on. The article states, or is entitled, "What Does Coronavirus Look Like?" CDC releases images of the first American beer virus patient. Okay, so let's read and see what she says. She says, "We've all seen pictures of the SARS beer virus, but until now, most of these have been artists' impressions and diagrams. Now, new images from the CDC taken from samples from the first American case of the beer virus show the virus in incredible detail." So you see what I'm saying? So they know when they first put something out, they know how important that is. First impressions, we all know the importance of a first impression, right? So when you first saw it, you got these blue and red color spikes, and it looked, they did all of this incredible detail, and that they say that they claim that they got now, but they didn't have it then because they're admitting that they didn't have the incredible detail. So how the hell did they come up with all of these shapes and these spikes and these colors? Okay, when they didn't have it at the time. So that's what you have to understand. So it's like, we know that when you first see something, that captures the mind. It captivates the mind. That's how people are going to see it. They're not going to go back into an article 2 months later, hidden in some obscure newspaper or online in a blog and be like, oh, okay, that's what it really actually looked like. Now you have to do your research to figure out why there is such a chasm between reality and the matrix. Now, she continues on because she's interviewed. She has some guy with a PhD that she's conferring with. And so this is what he says. He says, "If you want to see and be able to identify viruses, much less determine any detail on them, which helps you categorize them." So the detail helps you to categorize them. Okay, you have to use an electron microscope, said Brian William Jones, PhD, Associate Professor of Ophthalmology and Neuroscience at the University of Utah, who has been using electron microscopy for over 20 years. So it don't get no more better than that in terms of credibility. He letting you know, you want to see these viruses, you got to see them in high-powered electron microscopes. This is termed, TEM, transmission electron microscopy, okay? And it's another way that they amplify the virus, which is through a process called PCR, polymerase chain reaction. Okay, so we're going to get off of that. We're not going to get ahead of ourselves, but I want you to, I'm just throwing that out there because I know some of you are already familiar with these terms. Okay, so he goes on to say, there are many kinds of viruses and they all have different sizes. The largest viruses are about 500 nanometers in diameter, which means that you could only see them as dots in a light microscope. The smallest are around 20 nanometers in size, which means that you could never see them in a light microscope, said Jones. So I want to show you guys the front. I don't know if I showed this already, but I want to make sure that I do. And if I haven't, or if I have already, so what? We're going to make sure that you commit these things to memory. Now, as you can see, this is what she was talking about. This is what she was talking about. This is this pizza, like she said, and this is these blue dots. But what did we find out? Now, see, this just said this is incredibly detailed. We weren't able to get these images. It was hard. It was labor intensive, etc. You probably never get another image like this again. Now, dig this. We know what? We already know that viruses have no color. Okay, and then what do we also know? We also know from one of the last segment, what was said in the last segment, that nature brings about order through color. Are we about to prove this without a shadow of a doubt? And so when you give something color and you feed it, you change it. If I was to change give something like I have a child and I had technology where I could change its skin color and I fed it certain sugars, different forms of food. Can I say for a fact that I've changed the organism? Okay, so that's the thing in science. How do we forget the tenets of science? Anytime that you're conducting the scientific information, when you add variables, you change the organism. When you add variables, you cannot change the color of something and feed something and nurture something and then say that that is the same thing that it started off as. You just can't do that in science. Okay, so we know even though that she act like she's telling the truth, she's not. Because we know that one, viruses don't have any color. So where these blue dots and all this different stuff. And some people say, well, yeah, we know we color it. But I'm saying, look at the argument. The argument is you can't change something. You can't feed it, have it grow, and then say, oh, well, okay, yeah, this is the same thing that is, we just fed it and we didn't. No, those are changes that are made. Okay, and we're going to prove that through the videos that we show a little later on in this segment. All right, so that's what you get from that. Now, we go to another article, and this is from Cosmos, The Science of Everything, and it says, what happens in a virology lab? So, you know, that's the resource right there. And I'm going to just read a couple excerpts out of here. And it says, and this is this guy, he has a PhD. Let's see, who is it? PhD, student at the University of Queensland's Faculty of Medicine. His name is Ross Balch. So that's who I'm quoting in this article. Okay. And the title up at the top is, how do you grow and keep a virus? Viruses require a host cell to stay alive. So that's number one. Viruses are not surviving outside of the host. Now we're going to see, like I said before, we're going to see how much of your worldview of viruses has been dictated by the science of Hollywood and how much have been dictated from the natural matrix. Now it says viruses require a host cell to stay alive. Now I'm quoting him. Viruses are extremely fragile, says Balch. One of the interesting things with working with them is that it is actually incredibly hard to grow viruses because they need very specific conditions, because they are so easy to kill. I mean, this ain't doing nothing for the reputation of viruses, because according to Hollywood, when you see movies that have to deal with viruses, because remember, they put them in the horror and sci-fi section, which immediately should let you know subliminally they want you to be afraid. They put them in the horror, and then they act like they're looking at this virus in these microscopes that they can't see viruses in. And if they are seeing the virus, they have to be saying that they're seeing it inside of a host, because a virus can only be it can only survive inside of a host cell, which means it has to be in some form of bacteria, has to be in some form of a fungus or an animal or a human being or a plant. Otherwise, it can't be highly transmissible, because as you can see in the real world, it takes so much just to keep them alive. Let's continue to keep reading. He says, because they are so easy to kill. This is the reason why washing ethanol on your hands is so good at getting rid of blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to say that because I don't want YouTube to insinuate that I'm giving medical advice. By the way, this is not what we're doing. We're taking a scholastic approach to the information that has been given to us, that we're bombarded with, and we're trying to make sense of it all. Let's continue to keep reading. To combat this, viruses are put in special cells that can be grown on a petri dish. The cells are specially designed to grow in a lab and often require minimal effort to keep alive. Just a bit of sugar or nutrients in the form of a jelly-like media. The cells also like growing at the right temperature, so they can be forced to start or stop reproducing quite easily by turning the temperature up or down. When a virus is not being used, it is stored in facilities at -80 degrees Celsius or in liquid nitrogen. Look at all the stuff they got to do to keep this virus alive. You see what I'm saying? And then when you had number 45 president talking about, oh, well, yeah, it'll be killed in the sunlight. The heck with the sunlight, it'll be killed at room temperature. Remember that news report where it was a nurse who contaminated the vaccines because they left it out and it was no good? See, that's different from what the movies propagate, or a virus. Because remember, they're talking about a virus. They're not talking about a bacteria, a fungi, or a plant, or an animal, usually most of the time, as they're in their labs propagating it to you like, oh, it's such an infectious agent. It's only infectious when they put it in a host. So they have to be in a lab doing this on their own. Remember, the dispute was with Fauci and them was just what lab they created it in. Nature don't do this. See, they're not making nature responsible for this. They're going off the premise that, okay, we should work with them because we just may run into something like that. So in order to do so, let's create a monster to deal with a monster. That's their rationale. But the reality of it is, this is so fragile. They got to keep it in temperatures -80 degrees Celsius, liquid nitrogen. Okay? And so you have to understand the difference between those, because when you're talking about, most people just use these terms and don't understand the difference. So when you're talking about a virus, when you're talking about a bacteria, and you're talking about a fungus, know the difference between the three. A virus is seen as fragments of DNA. Technically, in the scientific literature, it's not even considered alive because it needs a host. It needs a host. Now, when you have bacteria and fungi, this is what's different. So you have two forms of life, they say, generally speaking, prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. Prokaryotes are simple cells, unicellular organisms, okay? Like bacteria, green sea algae, and stuff like that. Green and I think it's green and blue or green and red sea algae is maybe in that category too as well. But the fact of the matter is that's bacteria's realm, okay? Single-celled organisms that have what's called a nucleoid. It's like this irregular region inside the bacteria where the genetic material is stored, okay? They don't have a nucleus where the genetic material is stored and have a plasma membrane around it. All the organelles in a eukaryotic cell or a complex organism like plants, animals, and humans, okay? They have these organelles inside of the cell, like the mitochondria where the energy is made, the endoplasmic reticulum and stuff like that. Okay, you get what I'm saying? So the bacteria is a single-celled, simple organism without all of these fancy other little cells living inside it. And, we are the eukaryotes, like fungus is in that. Okay, fungus, plants, animals, humans are eukaryotic cells. But both of them have the ability to survive outside of a host. That's the difference. But this virus, this is a science that he's pushing on you. He says that, okay, only in our labs can we see it. And then so we know it's not that. We know when we put it in something or it finds its way into a host, this is what makes it dangerous. But as we've already came to the conclusion, since we know that nature didn't come up with this and he's coming up with it in his labs, what is he really doing? He's just merely creating things to put it in biological entities in order to create a realm that is always going to be ruled by this idea where humans will be determined by how well they come out of this age of biological and chemical warfare. That's it. You see, so this is what's going on. Your idea of a virus is totally different than how it actually operates in this realm. Okay, I mean in the natural matrix, and you have to understand that. So when we take a look at all of those things and we draw those conclusions, we definitely be like, okay, well, yeah, I thought this, because like even the movies that we see, based on sci-fi or based on, communication, you see them with the satellites and all of that, and they'll be triangulating somebody's position. But the reality of it is, those of us who know 99% of communication, that means the telecommunications industry, that means the internet, is done on ground cables in the ocean. Not no satellites, 99%. So like I said, how much of your thought process is rooted in movies? Remember we talked about the maps from the previous segment. They'll show these maps in their cartoons. They'll show these maps in their James Bond movies and stuff. With what? The United States being the same size as Africa. But they know better. But it's not about that. They're teaching you. They're cultivating your idea. They're molding your worldview. You see what I'm saying? And so it don't matter about the facts. It don't matter about what you knew about the science, because you're spending day in, day out being programmed to think that this is what the world looks like. This is what these entities that don't even exist in our wavelength look like. Because see, we're going to go over it again. The electromagnetic spectrum. You have radio waves, microwaves, infrared, visible light, UV, X-rays, gamma rays. All right, that's the spectrum. Remember, it's one whole thing. These are just different aspects of the electromagnetic spectrum. So just different aspects of this one solid energy, which manifests our reality. And it is different realities in each aspect. Oh, we're going to get off into that. Oh, this is deep. Okay, and we're going to prove that without a shadow of a doubt. These videos are going to help make more sense of this. So the thing is that you have viruses existing. They don't even exist in the wavelength of light, visible light, this part of the spectrum where we make our experience known. So they literally have to color it, which I said again, to color something, you change it. Just to see it, just to identify what it is, they have to bring color to it. And y'all said color wasn't important. This is how nature brings about order. And you're going to see that. So what we're saying is that how much of what you know about the science is rooted in Hollywood. So now we know what? Viruses have no color. We know that they get these grainy images from these electron microscopes, these super-powered electron microscopes. Not even enough to know exactly what it is. But then we have to trust that when they come out with these, after combining their imagination with theoretical mathematical formulas, that this is what it actually looks like. And we got to say, well, yep, that's what it is. I know that it looks different than that. But how are we going to prove that? Check. Remember the last segment, and I'm bringing this full circle. I know we're running on, but I love to give y'all this information. Remember the last segment where we talked about a particular person who worked at King's College? What she did was submit some photos to some individuals who were credited with the discovery of the DNA molecule. These scientists being James Watson and Francis Crick, and that photo being sent by a chick named Rosalind Franklin, who we said specialized in what was called X-ray crystallography, which is a study of how crystals form. That's the science they use for this picture, and this is the photo that they came up with, because I'm gonna let you see it for yourself and then show you how this is how they do things. This is Rosalind Franklin. This is they literally call this the UFO photo. This is the photo that they sent. And like I said, after some math that they did, they came up with the double helix. Still to this day have never seen the DNA molecule. But from that photo, from this photo and some math, they said, we gave you the double helix. So you see what I'm saying? So from these powerful microscopes and these grainy images and some crazy math, that's what they come out with and tell you what it is. So like I said before, is most of what you know Hollywood, or is most of what you know from the natural matrix? You see what I'm saying? So you have to understand that that's the point. Oh, I know I'm killing y'all. I know y'all was thinking I was on, no, and we still got a little bit more to go. Now, I'm finna show y'all something. I'm finna show a video. 1976 Copyright Act, Section 107. This is for purposes of commentary, criticism, scholarship, news reporting, education. But overall here at the FOF Squad, waking your ass up. So, you know, as we go into, because we're going to show you. We're going to show you without a shadow of a doubt. We're going to show you how things exist on different levels and how nature brings about order through color. Finna show y'all, man. Look, because I know, like we said, they got to hear it from them. They got to hear it from them. They can't hear it from us.
Hey, smart people. You are looking at trees. Normal trees here on Earth. We don't usually see them this way because our eyes can see just a small sliver of the light that hits our planet. You're seeing plants as they appear outside of the visible range. Just beyond the red end of the spectrum, thanks to a special camera that can see near infrared light. This hidden world of color, invisible to us, holds clues about why trees and other plants look the way they do here at home, and even what they could look like on other planets.
I'm killing you. See, that's infrared. That's a step below visible light. So right under our range, nature looks totally different. A totally different level of existence. Totally different colors, which means about totally different order, because like he said, we can try to get an idea of things just by color. So this is to show you how important color is in biology. So like I said before, when you give something a different color, you essentially change it. And we know, you cannot ignore the tenets of science and experiments. When you give something color, you change it. See, you gotta watch them, they tricky. So that's exactly what I'm letting you know. So I'm gonna give you another example. Now, we are already familiar with this, how the sun sees you. We're gonna go to the 136 mark. Now it's gonna go. Now I want to show you something. Like in this level of existence, in this visible spectrum, they're part of this visible spectrum. When we look at glass, what do we see? Glass looks clear, right? Now when you look at things with UV, now UV is above the visible light spectrum. Okay, so this is another level of existence. Now, and infrared is going to look possibly different. I can't recall what it is. I have to, go back and look at that. But I know that when in UV, you're about to see exactly how glass looks. Now, you know what it looks like under visible light. Now, check this out. Dig this. Let me get to it. Now, this lady's wearing glasses. Okay. Hold on. See? Hold on, let's go back a little bit. Glass blocks UV. That's glasses she got on, not sunglasses. See, glasses, as you seen what it said, glasses look black in UV. Different color. See, this is what I'm telling you. Don't get lost in the color black, because even in different levels of the spectrum, you look like a different being. You get to X-rays, you can't even see yourself. Somebody can see through you. You see, so you see what this material is like. So imagine glass is clear as we see it in the visible spectrum. but then it looks black in UV. So you got to imagine what they're doing. It blocks UV, these cars, and then so they even tint the windows to go a step further. Because think about it, it's absorbing the light. And what do they tell us? See, we know, I explained in the book how this is really a carbon star up there. But it shows you what the light is. If the glass, which is clear, is absorbing the light is black. Do you see what I'm saying with this energy? Think about it. Light being dark just confuses you. Didn't it just say that it absorbed the light and it's completely dark? And what happens when we absorb the light? Don't we get darker? See, because like I said, this is irrefutable evidence. And that's why I'm saying you got to be careful with them, and you see how sneaky they are in this regard. You see what I'm saying? And I've been showing you like on each level of the spectrum. So like when you are adding color to viruses, you're essentially changing them. Because light has a function. We already know this because they already define what skin is to you. Like it's just a covering, an outside covering, and not some hypersensitive web that has come together in order to absorb radiation from the sun. One of the primary responsibilities of the skin is to absorb light. Nina Jablonski in her book Skin, she's a professor. Okay, but you probably had to hear that from the Blanco again. But this is what I'm talking about. As you can see, you're starting to get an idea of how much of your science is rooted in Hollywood and how much is actually, really being, really stems from the natural matrix. I'm proving this to you. You thinking they in these lab coats like they're trying to, like I said, protect themselves from the virus, actually using these labs to specifically designed. They're like, it's specifically designed to make sure that they can grow it because it's so fragile. It easily can be killed. But you have the perception that it's so dangerous. Remember, we're just talking about the virus. We're not talking about when they put it in the host, a bacteria, a fungus, an animal, a plant, or a human. We're not talking about that. When you watch these movies, viral outbreak, remember, like I said, they condition you to be in a state of fear. They already put it as a horror classification. You're going to be scared. So what happens when you actually see it on the news? You work out the behavioral programming. You see the colors. You see the spikes. You see all of the state of confusion that your government is in, that health officials are in, and you get scared. Just like the movies. When in reality, we have to believe that that's exactly what it is. They got their labs. They're saying after they take these grainy images and do some math calculations, this is what it looks like. And we're going to add some color. Even though we know it doesn't have color. And even though real scientists know, well, yeah, we know it doesn't have color. We know it. Why ain't you telling the people? You think it's of no consequence, but I guarantee if people knew that it was not what you made this out to be, then they probably would take a different approach. And that's what I'm talking about. That's what I was able to successfully prove. And we got more. I'm just getting started. I just kind of wanted to lay the groundwork. Wanted you guys to know that a lot of us may be further gone than we expect. We sit up here and we analyze the world through the lens of Hollywood, through its science, and not even through the compartmentalized information that we're given through the K through 12 programming. Natural immunity, all of that stuff go out the door. We don't even think about that no more because we got our shit stemmed in Hollywood. We watch so many movies and we watch them all the time and all of this programming that this is what they come up with. They talk about a virus and they, how explosive it is and how it can get out and all. No, it needs a host. It ain't going nowhere without no cell body. Nowhere. It's extremely fragile. Like I said before, go to that article way back in the day where, they leave it out. It's already done with. It needs that host quickly. And it was made in the lab. That's what you got to think about. So understand, when they go off into making these things, it's for a weapon and not for the best interest of humanity. FOF squad.